Goofy Good TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. Like, you know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Trump tries to run and hide from the Iran war, but he can't. Before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. We're the hardest working newsman in the business is back. It only get worse for the white supremacist U.S. empire. Let's get into it. Salute revolutionaries.
Donald Trump just ran away from the press as Iran struck yet another tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Then Donald Trump called up his personal stenographer, Barack Ravid, over at Axios, and Donald Trump said, "I'm only doing a semi-negotiation now. My plan is I'm just going to, quote, low-key this thing, and I'm not even going to really pay attention to it anymore." Trump said, if we just let time take its natural course, Iran will probably surrender and go bankrupt. So I'm just going to low-key it now. Iran seems to have waited to strike this specific tanker right around the time the futures market was opening. I think Iran realizes Donald Trump's market manipulation. And at this point, Iran has basically hit 1 to 2 tankers every day over the past week, including this weekend. And also the Houthis continue to strike hard at the Saudi interests in Yemen, as well as in Saudi Arabia. Eastern Saudi Arabia was hit quite hard earlier this morning by the Houthis as well. I'm going to show you what went down first. Let me just show you Donald Trump running away from the press. Upon his return to Washington, D.C., he did not look healthy. It's an understatement. Play this clip.
Mr. President, come talk to us. How is
Then around 6:26 p.m., Donald Trump basically closed off the White House, calling a lid. Why even bother talking to the press anymore when Iran is striking tankers in the Strait of Hormuz? Let me show you what it looked like over here. You'll see this burning tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran also seems to have shot down numerous U.S. MQ-9 Reapers, at least one, maybe multiple, in the Sirik area as well. But let me show you this tanker on fire. Let's play it. Show you another angle of that as well. Well, let's take a look right here at some of the satellite footage that we have. You can see over here a large oil spill in the water in the Strait of Hormuz from yesterday's ADNOC tanker that was hit. That's the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Their tankers have been hit. 2 earlier this week, another one over the weekend. The fire put out, but obviously massive oil spills in the Strait of Hormuz. And now UK MTO, remember that organization that would publish every time a ship was threatened? Even if it was threatened, they would do a publication to warn the other mariners. Well, now the UK MTO just covers it all up as well. We had to learn from a release by ADNOC, again, that's the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, that there was even a strike the other day, multiple strikes this past week. But we've been telling you about it. We've been following the surveillance footage. We can see what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. We can see what's going on in Yemen and Saudi Arabia, despite our corporate media here being like, whatever, it is what it is. Donald Trump is posting this right now. Iran has no money. And he underlines no money. 51 years of bad behavior. Is this your plan to win the war? On Friday, Trump was posting, Donald Trump won the war. And Pete Hegseth posted, Donald Trump won the war. And now you're saying Iran has no money. Also, Trump, very deranged, posting videos of a flag on a boat from some unknown time period saying King Trump. Come on. This is all just so utterly embarrassing. As I noted earlier, Iranian air defenses reportedly shot down an unidentified drone over Sirak near the Strait of Hormuz. Show you what that looked like. Let's play it. Also, a suspected U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drone, the B-roll, you'll see right here, crashed in Djibouti. You can see that. Earlier this morning, Ansar Allah, it's the Houthis, Ansar Allah, they struck a Saudi cargo shipment in the port of Mocha with drones and ballistic missiles. They also struck deep in Saudi Arabia, eastern Saudi Arabia, and Aramco refinery there earlier today, last night into the early hours of today. And then during that phone call Sunday with Axios, Donald Trump said the United States is, quote, low-keying it with Iran. It will work out. It always works out. It's like a chess game, Trump said, not expressing any anger or frustration about the fact that Iran has been holding up an announcement on a deal with Oman to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iran really hasn't been holding up anything. I mean, that's how they're framing it on Axios. The U.S. isn't involved in the negotiation. Iran can do it. So Iran's a negotiation with Oman. The U.S. isn't involved in it at all. And there are all these people who are saying now Iran is adding these maximalist terms in order to open up the Strait of Hormuz, like they want sanctions relief and they want Israel out of Lebanon and they want access to a $300 billion fund and they want to keep their ballistic missiles and they want all of these things. I'm like, that ain't maximalist. Whether you like it or not, Iran has been saying these same things since March. They said it in April in Islamabad at the Islamabad talks. It found its way in the Memorandum of Understanding. They've been saying it in July. They're saying it in August. While Donald Trump's out there, I'm going to blow the effing S out of them. I'm going to blow your bridges up. I'm going to destroy your civilization. I want to make a deal. They're very nice. I hate them. They're nice. Iran's been saying the same exact thing since March. Not a maximalist demand. Well, it's not different than what they said. Whether you feel it's maximalist or not, the U.S. lost the war, and Iran is now saying and has been saying, you want us to open up the Strait of Hormuz? You have to give us these things. That's where we're at right now. Yeah, so Trump to Axios said all of those things. Also, Axios, Barack Ravid, Trump's stenographer, also reporting Israel rejects the Gaza Board of Peace 15-point document. The IDF will not make any withdrawal from Gaza until Hamas disarms. I mean, the heavy weapons, the less heavy weapons, all the weapons. And we're talking real disarmament, not fictitious disarmament, is what Netanyahu said. Okay, well, Donald Trump made this fake organization called the Board of Peace. And Donald Trump announced the deal was a done deal. First up, he said it last October, but we know he lies about everything. Then a week and a half ago, he said Israel and Hamas agreed. And Netanyahu said, let me be very clear, I don't agree. Also, Netanyahu said he plans to unilaterally invade Iran to Channel 13 in Israel as well. Regardless of what the United States does, Netanyahu says, we're going to go and attack Iran. That's just what he said to Channel 13. But a senior U.S. official in the White House just said, Trump is not bothered by Netanyahu's statement on the Gaza plan. We understand Bibi's political needs. We have no problem with it, as long as he continues to do what we ask. You're doing what he asks. You can act all tough We're unbothered. We're unbothered. We're unbothered. That's their. What you need to know about Trump as a psychopath, as a truly deranged human, is he will flood the zone with every single option, whether it's hate bombing, love bombing, threatening your life, pretending you're his best friend, saying you're good looking, saying you're ugly, hating you online, loving. It doesn't matter. He doesn't have a sense of shame. He doesn't have principles or values, but all those things, he floods the zone with it over and over and over again, ultimately until he hopes he gets his objective. That's all he cares about. All the other stuff that he's doing is forms of manipulation. So now he's at the phase with all of this. I'm unbothered, which shows you that he's maximum bothered, right? I'm unbothered. They could do what they want. He can do what he wants. They could do what they want. Iran, I'm only semi-negotiating. And watch, in the next 24 hours, he'll be like, they've crossed the line. They've hit a tanker. I'm bombing the effing S out of them. That's what I'm doing. Just look at their actions yesterday, right? They issued an ultimatum, the Pentagon, giving defense contractors 21 days. Come up with ways to dramatically accelerate weapons production because we're out of our interceptors. Okay. I like how Trump and MAGA are the ones who like accuse other people of communism. Donald Trump taking the defense industry and saying, come up with a plan in 21 days for me. Okay. You had a $1 trillion military budget. $1 trillion last year, and you ran out of weapons. The catastrophic and unlawful war should never have taken place in the first instance. You had $1 trillion and you ran out of weapons. Just like Trump bankrupted casinos, he bankrupted our military, and it's so damn embarrassing. That's the latest. Iran struck a tanker. Trump
And Donald Trump promised overwhelming force. Iran answered with missiles. Now, after weeks of confrontation, Washington appears to be looking for a diplomatic exit. Iran is warning the Gulf states to tell Trump to back off or face consequences at the same time. Reports say that the US has burned through much of its long-range precision missile inventory. There's more in this next report. Take a look.
Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is all gone, it's all gone. Their radar is all gone. Their leaders are all gone.
The reason they want to make a deal is they have to just beat the shit.
Then on Friday, Donald Trump again claimed victory over Iran. Well, wars are not decided by who fires the first missile. They are decided by who can keep fighting the longest. And that is the lesson emerging from the latest US-Iran confrontation. For weeks, the United States relied on precision strikes to pressure Iran. The expectation was simple: increase the military cost, force Iran to compromise. But Iran did not back down. Instead, it continued missile launches, maintained its military posture, and insisted it would not negotiate under pressure. At the heart of Iran's missile campaign is one weapon drawing growing attention. The Khyber Sheikh, it's a solid fuel ballistic missile. Unlike liquid fuel missiles, it can be launched much faster because it does not need lengthy fueling before launch. It is also road mobile, making it harder to detect and destroy before takeoff. But what has attracted the most attention is its reported ability to maneuver during the final phase of flight. Instead of following a completely predictable path, the warhead can adjust its trajectory and it descends towards its target. That makes interception more difficult and puts greater pressure on missile defense systems. At the same time, Iran has widened the pressure beyond the battlefield. According to reports, Tehran warned Gulf states that if they encourage further US military action, they too could face retaliation. The warning raises the stakes for the entire Gulf region, home to major energy infrastructure and some of the world's busiest oil export routes. Any disruption there would send shockwaves through global energy markets. So obviously, Gulf nations push Washington to stop its assault.
The Iranian strategy at this moment is to demonstrate to the United States that it cannot get away with limited tit-for-tats that would be costly for Iran and not very costly for the US, that they would externalize the pain and even escalate into new territory in terms of both the scale and scope of attacks. This is why we have seen Iran attacking Jordan, a country that it did not attack in the past. We have also seen Iranian allies in the region putting more pressure on energy routes like Bab el-Mandab, or even with a recent attack in Egypt on the Suez Canal.
This comes in the back of multiple reports that the United States has used virtually all of its available long-range precision missiles during the conflict. The US maintains that America remains fully capable of defending itself.
Fortunately, I built up so much during my term. I rebuilt the military and also loaded it up with a lot of stuff. And we have certain types of munitions that are very powerful. That we have unlimited, virtual unlimited supply. We have others where it's a little bit tighter, and we're getting them in on a daily basis.
The US-Iran conflict, which began in late February 2026 alongside Israeli operations, has stretched into its 6th month, far longer than the initial 4 to 6 week timeline some officials projected. The US has not just run out of missiles, but also weapon systems, which are needed to defend its multiple US bases and thousands of soldiers deployed there. According to leaked assessment and analysis by US media, Patriot, THAAD, ATACMS, and precision strike missiles, along with Tomahawk, all are severely depleted. Well, obviously, no nation will publicly accept that its arsenal has run dry in the middle of a war, but the numbers are stark. Now, replenishing advanced missile stocks takes time. There is also geography. The United States is more than 11,000 kilometers away from the Gulf. Every interceptor, every cruise missile, every precision weapon has to cross oceans before reaching the battlefield. Sustaining a high-intensity campaign over such distances is far more demanding than fighting close to home. And that does not mean the United States lacks military power. It remains the world's strongest military. It still has enough bombs to keep bombing Iran for months. But modern wars are not only about firepower, they are also about logistics, industrial production, supply chains, and endurance. Iran understands that. Its strategy appears aimed at increasing the cost of prolonged conflict, rather than matching American military power weapon for weapon. Whether diplomacy succeeds or not remains uncertain, but one lesson is already becoming clear. In modern warfare, the side with the biggest arsenal is not always the side with the easiest path to victory.
Some who've speculated the strait will never go back to being the way it was before. What would you say?
I think they're saying that in a doomsday sort of way. I would say it in another way. The strait is never going back to the way it was because the Iranians have used or tried to use it as a choke point. What we are going to see over the next 2 years, the strait's going to become irrelevant.
Right, so it seems the Strait of Hormuz doesn't matter anymore. Well, there's a plot twist after 5 months of war, basically closing the bloody thing to most shipping. closing one of the most important energy transport routes in the world for the likes of oil and gas. Presumably the orange wombat in the White House then just blockaded it for shits and giggles. Who knew? Well, after months of war and the blockades and everyone panicking about keeping it open and what it's done to oil prices globally and the knock-on effect of all of us hitting us in the wallet, Trump's own Treasury Secretary is now suggesting Hormuz might as well just be a puddle in the desert. Who needs it, really? I mean, it's remarkable how the world's most important energy checkpoint has suddenly gone from DEFCON 1 to meh the moment they finally realised they can't actually control it, after all the time they spent proving how much it actually did matter. Because, of course, that was Scott Bessent, Trump's Treasury Secretary, saying the strait is never going back to the way it was and could eventually become completely irrelevant. Honestly, it's a plot twist worthy of a daytime soap, isn't it? Just with more oil and fewer attractive people. Donald Trump went to war with Iran, blockaded the place, spent months insisting America had the situation under control, and now someone in his own administration is basically saying maybe the answer is just to make the strait completely unnecessary then. Meanwhile, Iran has its own list of conditions for fully reopening it, which surely would be the easier option. And one of these is, of course, Trump ending his own blockade. So mission accomplished if the mission was to turn the whole thing into a diplomatic episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway? How do they propose to make the strait unnecessary then? Pipelines, lots of pipelines, because if history teaches us anything, it's that giant international pipelines are basically hit me signs for anyone with explosives and a grudge. Just ask Nord Stream. Remember that one? Nord Stream was blown up precisely because it was strategically important energy infrastructure. German prosecutors now claim a Ukrainian military-linked team destroyed it to cut Russian gas revenues funding the war. Europe was already desperately short of Russian gas that they were relying on when that happened, of course. But destroying Nord Stream just made sure you couldn't turn the route back on later on. Europe then had to scramble for LNG and alternative supplies instead. So Bessent's answer to the vulnerability of Hormuz is to build another vast network of energy infrastructure that in a future conflict, since the Middle East is so stable, as we all know, somebody else might decide is worth targeting. Pipelines can't change course or avoid a conflict zone or sail somewhere safer. They sit exactly where you build them. So Bessent's grand plan for Hormuz is to swap one sitting duck energy route for a few thousand miles of new, equally vulnerable sitting duck energy routes. You're not removing the risk, you're just burying it under the sand and hoping nobody brings a shovel. We all saw what happened with Nord Stream. But setting that aside for a moment, it seems the Trump administration can't actually make its mind up even amongst themselves over this.
Well, our expectation is you're going to see the same amount of oil and gas come out of the Gulf that you saw before the conflict started. That is what the Iranians have told us that they are going to do. That's what the entire Gulf coalition wants to do as well. But, you know, we don't trust, we verify. We actually look not at people's words, but at people's deeds. You see some people within the Iranian system, of course, talk about tolling. The Iranians have told us they have no plans to toll the Strait of Hormuz. But again, we're going to see what actions actually happen. What's been going on for the past week or so is that the Iranians and the Gulf countries, particularly Oman, have been talking about how to ensure the safe flow of traffic.
J.D. Vance there talking about pre-conflict flows, whatever the hell they even are. But that's what Washington wants, according to him. Just get the oil and gas moving again. So presumably that means giving Iran everything it wants then. Don't be silly. Just get commercial shipping operating more or less, just as it did before Trump and Netanyahu decided to bomb Iran and thought that was a good way of improving the regional stability. And that will be perfectly straightforward if everyone agreed that after the shooting stops, you could simply wind the clock backwards, JD? But they don't. Vance is talking as if the goal is to restore the old commercial results, and Bessent has just told you that the strait itself will never be the same way it was ever again. Those two ideas fit together about as well as Donald Trump and a polygraph do. One man wants yesterday's traffic back, the other's already talking about a future where the old routes no longer matter. And sitting somewhere between those two American positions are, of course, Iran and Oman, the two states that are actually involved, the two states that actually matter, the ones who are in control, the ones whose coastal waters the Strait of Hormuz belong to, and the ones who are actually trying to figure out what ships are actually going to be able to do in the meantime.
West Asia, Iran says deal on the Strait of Hormuz is close but not enough to open the waterway. Iran said on Saturday that a deal with Oman on the control of the Strait of Hormuz was close but would not be enough to free up the waterway at this moment. And the United Arab Emirates said Iran had hit another ship in the strait. Agreement before Iran and Oman over the strait, which separates the two countries, is seen as vital to a wider deal to end this war, which began with US and Israeli attacks on Iran on February 28 this year and led to Tehran establishing a chokehold over the major energy export route.
An Iran-Oman shipping deal is one thing, but putting Hormuz back exactly as it was before the war started is quite another, isn't it? They're not the same thing, and Tehran's been very clear about that. So what do they want then, Damo? Well, before they just spun as Iran suddenly piling on a brand new list of demands to the table, much of it was already part of the argument, was on the table back in June. The old Memorandum of Understanding that Trump got bored with, remember that one? Well, the American account of the June Memorandum set an initial 60-day period for safe commercial passage without charge, while the permanent questions like future administration and maritime services, they were all left for further negotiation, but obviously were never gotten around to. In other words, all the difficult bits, they just got postponed, kicked down the road for another day. Well, now we've arrived at the difficult bit, just a bit later than was originally planned. And suddenly the conversation isn't simply, can a tanker sail through here? It's who runs what afterwards. Who handles services? Who decides the routes? Who provides the security? What companies might have to pay for going forwards? What does Iran get? What's a man willing to accept? What will Washington end up having to live with because they're not involved? And this is where Trump's problems get even bigger, because the argument is no longer simply about getting tankers moving again. It's about what Hormuz will look like after the war, and Iran very much has a seat at the table deciding all of that, whereas he very much doesn't. For a strategy supposedly designed to reduce Iranian leverage, it's gone spectacularly well. And then Tehran's arrived with a list of conditions that Washington's going to have to deal with that it knew all about back in June.
Iran has laid down a series of conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, complicating the efforts to restore normal traffic through this crucial waterway. In fact, we're learning that the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council has said that the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed until the United States lift the naval blockade and the sanctions on their country, withdraw the military forces from the region, pays war damages, and also releases frozen Iranian assets and ends attack on the regional allies as well.
Now, we need to do a little bit of sorting out here first, though, because some of this has been getting a bit twisted online. Not all of those demands suddenly appeared this weekend. Stuff like sanctions relief, frozen assets, the future running of Hormuz, they were already part of those wider June negotiations. They are not anything new. And that $300 billion figure that's been going around, well, that was part of the broader reconstruction and development framework being discussed at the time as well. It's not some brand new $300 billion overcharge that Tehran has decided to slap on the strait. But even after you scrape off the right wing crying and the social media noise, Trump's still left staring at what he would probably consider a ransom note. End the blockade, lift the sanctions, release the frozen assets, compensation, American military withdrawal according to Tehran's position, and sort out those American breaches of the wider agreement whilst you're at it. But really, it's that first one that deserves pride of place here, because it's the one that ought to make Trump's cheeks burn red with embarrassment if he wasn't so orange that it would never show up. End your blockade. Because Trump imposed that blockade to squeeze Iran. That was the point of it. Maximum pressure with more ships. You will bend because America has more hardware and more sanctions and lots more bravado than it's got functioning brain cells. Except the shipping system didn't simply snap back into place, did it? Iran doesn't play that way. They had the blockade that actually blockaded most of the shipping, the one that actually worked, the one that actually meant something, the one that just wasn't a sticking plaster to try and look hard and tough from the outside. And so Washington's now saying, according to Vance anyway, that if a final arrangement delivers unrestricted commercial navigation, it's prepared to remove the blockade Trump imposed in the first place. There is something particularly Trumpian about creating the problem, then trying to claim credit for partially undoing it, isn't there? It's like slamming a door shut, pocketing the key after you've locked it, and then expect applause when you finally agree to open it again. And even if the blockade eventually does go, what still doesn't reverse has been the changes to Hormuz. Because the argument now is about what comes next. And Iran's not sitting there looking for permission to return to the old order. It's bargaining over a new one now. Future administration, maritime services, routing security, commercial conditions, all of it now being discussed with Iran at the center of the process, which, considering how this started, is quite an achievement. Washington didn't want Iran using Hormuz as a permanent leverage. That was the fear. That's what we were told had to be avoided at all costs. Tehran squeezing the shipping, markets reacting, oil prices jumping, governments having a panic, and suddenly everyone has to deal with Iran. They're the boogeyman. They're the permanent bad guys. Nobody wants to deal with them. So Trump goes to war, and after all of that, what have we got? Everybody having to deal with Iran. It's a masterclass in shooting yourself in both feet and calling it a win. And Oman, of course, is just as important here too, because they're not just cheering Tehran on from the sidelines. Well, they have pushed back against Iran's higher proposed charges and have also argued for safe, commercially usable navigation. It has itself floated a much lower transit toll figure of around 3%. So even the neutral negotiators are saying things will not go back to how they were. So the argument's not really about money changing hands at all anymore, is it? It's just a case of how much, what is it actually paying for, and who gets to administer the system. And it's not around flexing here either, because a strait, of course, has got two coasts. Oman is the other coastal state here alongside Iran. Both are equally important. And they both accept that both have a legitimate role in whatever system comes next. So America can't just show up, wave another destroyer around and declare the strait liberated from the tyranny of the geography there, the tyranny of Iran, if you like, because Iran is there, sure, but so is Oman. And you haven't got beef with them at all, have you? And then we get to sanctions, because even if the politicians eventually do shake hands, the commercial shipping still has to believe the new arrangement's going to work. And so back we come to the insurers and the ship owners and the charterers and the lawyers and all the people who get very nervous when someone says, don't worry, this multi-million-pound vessel will probably be fine. Honest. War risk insurance around Hormuz has already gone through the roof. And Washington's own sanctions just created another headache and will continue to do so if a future maritime services system involves payments to an Iranian body that's already under American sanctions, as is also the case. As much as JD wants the strait back open, their sanctions on Iran could literally screw up any payment system for it. So that's got to go as well. But will it? It's bureaucracy at its most inspired. You invent a problem, then tie yourself in knots trying to solve it. Sanction Iran, negotiate with Iran, create a system involving Iran, and then have companies asking whether using that system might get them into trouble and get them fined because you sanctioned Iran. It's enough to make a banana republic cringe. And that really tells you how far from normal Hormuz still is, because if Washington genuinely thought it had restored the old system, its officials would be talking about getting ships back through it. But of course, as much as Vance might have alluded to that, Besant hasn't. He's already talking about how to stop needing Hormuz at all.
It is going to become just another body of water. And I would say that more than 50 or 70% of the energy that moves through the strait now is going to go through underground pipelines.
It's just another body of water now, apparently. Months of war, ships rerouting, oil markets in absolute panic, naval deployments, Iranian leverage, Omani and Pakistani mediation between both sides, all the insurance headaches, negotiations over who gets to run what. Now apparently it's all, who needs Hormuz anyway? Funny how quickly something stops mattering the second you realize you cannot force it back into line yourself because you've got no actual control of the situation at all, isn't it? And of course, Besant's answer was pipelines. Move enough energy through the strait instead of through it, and over time, dependence on Hormuz will fall. Or around the strait, I should say. Fair enough as an engineering idea, isn't it? But politically, it doesn't exactly eliminate vulnerability, it just moves it. And how long will your pipelines take whilst Hormuz is nominally closed then? Ask Saudi Arabia how well pipelines work right now with their Houthi issues at the other end of their east-west pipeline, for example. The pipeline part should absolutely make people pay attention, but not for the reasons Besant clearly thinks. Because we have, in fact, seen what happens when enormous fixed energy infrastructure becomes entangled in major geopolitical conflict. And no, before somebody rushes off with the wrong idea, I am not predicting that someone is going to blow up whatever pipelines Besant has in mind, but that is not the point either. And no, before somebody rushes off with the wrong idea, I am not predicting that someone is going to blow up whatever pipelines Besant has in mind, but that's also not the point. The point is that pipelines don't float above geopolitics just because they're buried underground. Nord Stream was a major strategic energy infrastructure project. Then geopolitics arrived, very violently. So replacing dependence on a maritime choke point with a dependence on hundreds or thousands of miles of fixed infrastructure running through a region currently busy showing how combustible it is in multiple different places might make you think you have reduced one vulnerability, but it certainly doesn't grant you magical immunity from every future possible blow-up. be it from Iran or whoever else, given these pipelines will no doubt have to cross multiple different borders. And I bet my bottom dollar the pipelines will terminate in Israel, should they ever come to pass, of course. So you haven't solved any problem here at all. You're just shifting it. That's all you're doing. And when you put all of this together, the picture Washington is painting is the most bizarre and confusing face-saving exercise attempt ever. Vance wants the old levels of oil and gas traffic back. Iran says an Oman deal by itself will never reopen the strait as it was, and that's just the start. Trump's blockade is now part of the bargaining and the problem. The future running of Hormuz is still being negotiated, but between Oman and Iran, because it's their coastal waters, and they're the only people that have got any say in this. And Bessant's already sketching out how to build enough alternative infrastructure to that to cut them out of it all, that the strait stops mattering at all. So balls to everything that's happened up till now, apparently. Plan A has gone about as well as a submarine with screen doors. So marvelously, in fact, has it gone, they're already explaining why maybe nobody needed Plan A anyway, so best we all just forget about it. Trump went in guns blazing to stop Iran from using Hormuz as leverage. Instead, he turned Hormuz into the world's hottest bargaining chip, got his own blockade thrown back in his face at the negotiating table, and now his team is frantically drawing up escape routes because they can't glue the old system back together again. Humpty Dumpty Hormuz. Trump didn't restore order in Hormuz. He just smashed it. He lost control of what came next, and now Washington's left picking through the rubble. For more on the Trump-induced chaos in the Middle East right now, do stick with this channel for more, such as this equally caustic option here for your next watch. Please do also hit like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, of course, and if not, why not? So as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and help support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. Cheers, folks. J.D. Vance there talking about pre-conflict flows, whatever the hell that even means. But that's what Washington wants, according to him. Get the oil and gas moving again. Just get it moving again. Well, I assume you're just going to do everything that Iran wants, in which case. That didn't work. Much of it was already actually part of the argument back in June. That old memorandum of understanding, memorandum of understanding. Yes, that's good English. The point is that pipelines don't float above geopolitics just because they get buried underground. Nord Stream was a major strategic energy infrastructure project. Then geopolitics.
Salute, fam.
Gung-ho for that. But Donald Trump has, against all judgment, all sanity, taken them into an unwinnable war in the Persian Gulf, and everybody knows it. Everybody in the United States knows it. In fact, the United States have a saying for it. Donald Trump is behind the 8 ball. Now, I'm a snooker player rather than pool. I've no idea what the 8 ball even is, but I know if you're behind it, you are in a jam. And Trump is in that jam right now, between a rock and a hard place, and the rock ain't Mount Rushmore. The rock is the destruction of the Republican Party in just a few months' time in the midterm elections. If the Democrats, who be no better, win the House of Representatives and the Senate, Trump will be being impeached every single week. Now, of course, there's a difference between being impeached and being convicted, but it only needs a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict the president. And as each drop in the opinion polls, as each drubbing in elections begins to dawn on the remaining Republican senators that this man is leading the party to destruction, don't bet against that 2/3 majority being achieved. And if it's achieved, if Trump is convicted, then he is in the mother of all difficulties, because no pardons will be possible. J.D. Vance, who would by default become president of the United States, could not possibly pardon the Trump gang. He might have to pretend he's going to, but something will come up on the way to the studio. The auto pen won't work. Something will happen, because J.D. Vance would be signing his own political death warrant by pardoning an impeached and convicted President Donald Trump. And if the President Trump is brought down and convicted, what about his extended family? And boy, is it an extended family. Gianni Infantino of FIFA was trying to sell the World Cup to a Kushner, and not even the Kushner you thought. That Kushner has a brother who's also on the make, on the take, and Infantino was going to sell the democratic, cultural treasure of the whole world. The game of football, not soccer, guys, doesn't exist. A bit like pool, if you get my drift. Football belongs to the world, and they were getting ready to sell it at vast profit for Infantino and one or two other plutocrats, maybe even Donald Trump himself, to another Kushner. So my point is, the crime family is quite a big one. I don't know how big the Genoveses are. I don't know how big the Gambinos are. But I know the Trump crime family is quite a number of people. Anyway, back to my point. The United States, having gotten into this war and unable to win it and unable to get out of it, is trapped in a vice, which is now obviously going to run all the way up to November and beyond. Look on it as a kind of October surprise, Donny. The Iranians may well offer a deal to an incoming new American administration that they are definitely not going to agree to with you in charge. After all, you killed so many of them. You killed so many schoolgirls. Who can forgive that? I mean, ask yourself, if somebody killed 160 little girls in your local primary school, how could you possibly forgive them? Let alone sit down, talk to them, and broker an agreement that will make them happy. The Iranian people are not like that. They don't mind sacrificing themselves for what they believe in and for their country. That much should be evident by now. If it isn't, you weren't watching the videos of Arba'in in Karbala, the annual commemoration of the martyrdom of the Imams, the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the martyrdom of his son Ali, are absolute cornerstones of the Shia Muslim faith. And when you're fighting an adversary who earnestly believes, trust me, they do, who earnestly believes that they will go to heaven in the bloodied rags they were standing in when you murdered them, that they will go to paradise, they earnestly believe that. That's a very difficult adversary to face, especially when the guys on the Abraham Lincoln are stinking. Yeah, stinking. They've been at sea for almost 300 days. They haven't seen a woman for 300 days. You get me? They haven't been ashore for 300 days. They've been eating meager, lousy rations for 300 days. They've been looking at each other's faces for 300 days. They've been smelling each other's armpits for 300 days, because quite often the shower don't work. Quite often the lavatories don't flush. You feel me? The United States Armed Forces are in a state of near mutiny, and they're led by a madman, as the recently departed chief of the Admiralty in the United States famously opined. I better get back to my point. The United States has now become a laughingstock. It was once feared. It was definitely once hated by people like me. Now we're laughing. We feared Richard Nixon. We feared Lyndon Johnson. He killed so many of the children that were important to us in Vietnam and elsewhere. He murdered so many people. They murdered so many people. And notwithstanding that it was a bipolar world then, the Soviet Union and the United States, we feared their power. Nobody fears Donald Trump. You get me? The Lego brigade of explosive media, the reduction of United States politics to little Lego men, brilliantly devised by the Iranians, the most successful soft power development in recent years. Everybody's laughing at them. And then Trump, who quite obviously is visibly, physically decaying, and for those downwind of him, he's decaying all right, suddenly sprouted big hair. I mean, it was kind of motorbike streaming in the wind. It was Easy Rider hair that he was sporting. There it is. He went from a guy who looked like he had alopecia, whose hair was falling out. He turned into a matinee idol with the swift stroke of a brush. Everybody started. And I myself, I got 10 million views this week just on hairdo gags. If I got 10 million, imagine how many billions there were of views across the world. We're all laughing at you, Donnie. And as Vinny the Chin could probably have told you, maybe did tell you, once they're laughing at you, it's kind of the end. And that is undoubtedly what we're looking at now, the end of American power. And that presages so many other things. The Chancellor of Germany, for example, Merz. Now, I'm going to be tough on the Germans this evening for reasons which will become clear. But when Chancellor Merz reaches 13 points, 13% in the public approval rating, it's over for Merz. It's over. You cannot possibly retain office, let alone make war, with 13% approval rating. And this is a direct consequence of Germany, not under Merz, under little soldier Schulz, joining Biden's war against Russia, thinking it could be won. And now that it hasn't been won, now that it isn't going to be won, then one after another, the leaders that plunged their countries into economic disaster for Biden's wars is themselves going to have to take a walk along that short plank and into the depths and disappearance from public and political view. Starmer was the first, about whom more in a minute. but Merz is undoubtedly going to be the second. In fact, I predict that in the month of August, Chancellor Merz will be no more. Now, just like in Britain, that doesn't mean the next guy will be any better. Might even be worse if that is imaginable. But the fact that these Western countries are feeling the need to overthrow their leaders in order to save their own political bacon is a measure of the collapse in the authority, the collapse in the credibility, not to mention the collapse in the popularity of the United States of America. We'll be talking particularly to Professor Sachs about what all that means for the future of the world later in the show. But back to Starmer. I kick myself for not knowing this or not working this out. I can only pray in mitigation, my absence from the country, my absence from Parliament now for 2 years nearly. I've been out of Parliament. Actually, exactly 2 years I've been out of Parliament. If I had been in Parliament, or even if I had been in the country, I might have smelt this sooner than I did. And I'm grateful to a man I know of, but scarcely know, called Steve Howell, who is a journalist of some note, a journalist with quite a political pedigree, last seen as the deputy head of communications of the Jeremy Corbyn administration under Seamus Milne. He's published a piece today called A Very British Coup, in which he describes how the deep state removed Keir Starmer. I was so deliriously happy at the demise of Starmer, I didn't pay enough attention to the choreography of the whole thing. The deep state, the intelligence agencies, the senior officials, the military top brass for the first time in modern times, orchestrated and organized the removal of the British Prime Minister and his replacement by someone who had promised to do the bidding of these agencies and to pony up the money that Starmer was resisting for the defense budgets. I saw all happening and commented on it all happening as it happened, but I didn't join it up. I didn't join the dots. I didn't read the joined up writing. I did think it was funny when the mouse that roared, little John Healy, an inky-fingered clerk, began roaring like a bull at his boss about the size of the defense budget. When I knew John Healy, he wouldn't say boo to a goose. But here he was in public, challenging his boss over the military and defense budgets. Then his big Stumer, big Palooka, a Scotsman representing Birmingham, I've forgotten his name already, a big idiot, started writing on social media as the Deputy Defense Secretary, directly challenging his leader over the size of the defense budgets. Then, raised from the grave, Lord George Robertson, whom I've known since he was a boy soldier, though unlike me, he failed his part one where I passed it. George Robertson, later the head of NATO, weighed in as a defense advisor to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, saying that the current level of defense expenditure in Britain was completely unacceptable, and Britain could not be defended on that money, when that we couldn't be defended by an ever-expanding welfare bill. I missed the ever-expanding welfare bill as it happens. But I should have put these things together, because it turns out, according to Howell, in this excellent piece today, Starmer was refusing to spend even more money on war and weapons than he had already agreed to do. And the military itself and the intelligence agencies themselves then coordinated the removal of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and only when they had secured a patsy called Burnham to be his replacement. And sure enough, Burnham immediately made clear that he knew on which side his bread was buttered, and promised the military, the intelligence services, everything that they asked for. Maybe more of that later. But the Israeli soft power has taken one hell of a beating. I mean, nobody wants to know them. Nobody wants to admit that they are a friend of Israel. Nobody wants to declare any longer their membership of the conservative, liberal, Labour, Reform friends of Israel. They're keeping the lists a secret now. But one man, a Scotsman like me, Professor David Miller, has just dealt the Israeli soft power in Britain a potentially fatal blow. Professor Miller, an esteemed professor and educator, was sacked from his job at Bristol University, not Southampton, as I earnestly said on Wednesday, for being an anti-Zionist. Professor Miller went to court to establish that it's perfectly legal, it's perfectly able to be fitted into the democratic framework paradigm in Britain to be an anti-Zionist. Some of the greatest Jews in history, like Professor Einstein himself, were anti-Zionist. And he won his case. And we all celebrated, but we were premature, because Bristol University decided to appeal. And last week, Professor Miller won again. And it is now an article of faith in Britain. It is now in the canon of British law that you cannot be discriminated against because you are an anti-Zionist. Sing hallelujah. You can.
Owens for what he saw as being disloyal or not accepting what he wanted. I think he'll give the same treatment to Bibi Netanyahu. And so I think the Israelis have really made a blunder, and I'm sure it's being done for political purposes, domestic political purposes. Oh, there will never be a Palestinian state. We're not going to agree to this at all. Trump can go pound sand. Well, it reinforces this concept that Trump's just a little bitch, that he has to do what Bibi Netanyahu says. And I don't think Trump likes being perceived that way. He likes to be perceived as he's the one telling Bibi what the score is. So, on the one hand, weighing more attacks on Iran, but apparently General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he is the principal military advisor to Donald Trump, has said, further attacks are only going to weaken us, not strengthen us, and they're not likely to force the Iranians to change. Now, Commander of CENTCOM, Brad Cooper, he reportedly, it sounds like in some regards, he shares Kane's view, but they've come forward with a, sort of a 20-day plan for bombing the hell out of Iran, in theory, even though they'll have less munitions than they did during the first 42 days of the war. It could be that they'll give it one more shot, thinking all we got to do now is put more military pressure and Iran will fold. And then when they do that and Iran ends up retaliating in a massive way on Israel and on other U.S. bases in Jordan, I think they'll realize, oops, that was a mistake.
How about Israel attacking Iran without the United States?
I don't see how they can, because they're going to need U.S. refuelers to do it. And they're going to have the cooperation of the Saudis to fly over Saudi territory. I don't, conceivably the Saudis might give in to U.S. pressure, but they're not going to allow Israel to do that. So I think Israel's just, talking out of their hat on this.
Do you think that the new agreement, the new military, I would say military pact or military cooperation with Turkey and Pakistan, are they gonna, talk with Saudi Arabia if they're gonna use their airspace? Because part of that is how they're gonna manage their difficulties with the region. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, how they're gonna manage their, the country in terms of the conflicts, ongoing conflicts with Iraq, with Yemen, and right now you mentioned Saudi Arabia. They need, Israel needs Saudi Arabia airspace, the Saudi airspace to attack Iran.
Yeah.
And how do you see the reaction on the part of those two countries?
Well, first of all, let's look at, they signed that agreement. And since signing that agreement, the Houthis and the PMF have launched attacks inside Saudi Arabia. What have Turkey and Pakistan done or said in regards to that? I don't even think there's been condemnation of the Houthis or the Iraqis, the Iraqi militia, or the PMF. I don't think either Turkey or Pakistan have said anything about that, and which goes, the agreement ostensibly says that an attack on one is an attack on all. Well, there's been an attack on one, and the others haven't reacted as if it's an attack on them.
What is, Larry, your understanding of Donald Trump getting back to the war, as you've mentioned? What is that all about when it comes to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz? Because after all, the whole operation is about the Strait of Hormuz right now. Nobody's talking about the nuclear program, anything else. And how I saw today, Democrats, basically all of them, they say the war was lost. Most of them, not all of them. The war was lost. We know that was a defeat, but we have to get out as soon as possible. It doesn't seem that would be the understanding on the part of Republicans. And what is your understanding of that?
Well, the Republicans, or let's say it, the Republican, and I'm including in that the MAGA base, they're split. So there is a real division there now, and it's not going to be quickly resolved. So it's there as a point of conflict that I've likened it, and I intend to write on this more extensively. That it's comparable, potentially comparable to the split that took place in the party out of which the Republican Party was born in 1854. So in 1854, the dominant party was the Whigs. The issue then was slavery. And, are we going to allow parts of the United States that are not currently slave states to be slave states or not? And that created a real fissure, a real division. Well, the division that's emerging within the MAGA base are those that want to surrender themselves to Israel, and those that say, no, we're not. We got to be America first, not Israel first. And so that's a real issue. Sorry, my dog he's hearing something going crazy. So there's a potential for that to really cause a split within the whole Republican Party, and that kind of split is going to weaken the Republicans going into the fall elections. So there's a sizable number of Republicans as well that are I think we talked about this yesterday. I mentioned Mark McCloskey, who was he's based in Missouri. He and his wife came to some notoriety during the Black Lives Matter protests. They were in St. Louis. They had a group of these Black Lives Matter people trying to come into the yard in their home. And they were standing outside with guns. But he had been Trump's campaign manager, and he had the task to work Pennsylvania for Trump in the 2016 election. So he was a genuine Trump supporter, big time. Not now, and it's all over Trump surrendering America first to making America second when it comes to Israel. So that tension's there, and so that's one of the other factors that's at play here, which could give Trump pause. Even though there's a part, he's getting a lot of pressure, from people that still have access to him, like General Jack Keane, retired, and General Fruit Loops or Keith Kellogg. He's getting, and then Miriam Adelson going, you got to do something about Iran. You can't let them off. You got to continue the military campaign. But then he's getting advice from General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying no. We can't. We've done everything we can do at this point. Any further military efforts like this are simply going to weaken us, not weaken them, weaken us. We're gonna end up giving up weapons that we can't afford to replace, or if we try to replace them, it's going to be 4 to 5 years before they're replaced. So there is no readily obvious military path forward. It's largely very negative and very harmful to the United States. That said, that doesn't mean that Trump will do what's rational, because he's done some pretty irrational things here of late.
Who's supporting these people like Keith Kellogg, General Keith Kellogg? Because he was, you remember when Donald Trump, he has decided he's going to be his envoy in Ukraine. Then right now in the West Asia, you see every time they want to talk, they want to say something about the war, Keith Kellogg is one of the few people that Fox News would ask him, would ask him to come on the program to talk about the war and how to manage the war. Who are these people? Are they supported by the military-industrial complex? Do they have the links with them, or there's somehow they get their support from the political parties?
Yeah, we're doing like a cheerleader cheer. Give me an I, give me an S, give me an R, give me an A, give me an E, give me an L. What does that spell? Israel. Yeah, Israel's the one funding it through the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. and it's it's a real problem. That the loyalty is not to America. The loyalty is to Israel, and so to that extent, they're carrying water for Israel, insisting that that's the only viable way forward for the United States. Pretty short-sighted view, but that's the Israelis have been trying to buy. They purchased these influencers, but the influencers, they're running up against the realities that America doesn't have the weapons that it once thought it did.
Israel today, Stas said that Stanislav Krapivnik, for those people who don't know Stas, he said that Mossad is involved in Ukraine to the neck. He said that there's so much involved. What do they want from Ukraine? I'm talking about Israelis.
Yeah, well, you've got this a prominent number of Ukrainian Jews who hated the Soviet Union, that they continued to hate Russia, ascribe to Russia the same, treating Russia as if it's the Soviet Union. It's not. But the real irony there is, here's Israel, who its foundation was predicated upon the Holocaust. We must never allow that to happen again. The Holocaust carried out by Nazis. It was the National Socialist Party of Germany that carried that out. And so, in theory, the Israelis said, never again. And yet they've aligned themselves with Nazis, which discredits their entire Holocaust argument, in my view. That we got to prevent this. This will never happen again. Therefore, we're going to align ourselves with the ideological heirs of the very movement that tried to exterminate us. It's crazy, and part of Putin and the Russian reluctance is a large, I would say upwards of 30%. It may be that high in Israel are Russian national, Russian passport holders. So you still have a number of Russians, but Russians who hate Putin.
Yeah, I even hating Putin and trying to do something for Ukraine. That's not the case for Ukraine. We know that.
Right. Yeah.
This is the tragedy, in my opinion, with Ukraine. That whenever you try to help them or to provide them with weapons, it means that they're going to get killed more and more. They're not going to be saved, or they're not going to be,
Yeah, they're caught in a meat grinder, and the Russians have a clear advantage, even though Russia is fighting a proxy war with NATO, and they've killed the Russians have killed a number of NATO personnel that have gone to Ukraine to provide advice, to provide intelligence, to operational support. But there have been several strikes, in particular over the last 3 or 4 weeks, that have killed a large number of NATO personnel.
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what was reported as the U.S. Air Force E-3B, the Century AWACS aircraft has been circulating over northeastern Saudi Arabia for several hours. Yesterday, we've learned that. And it means that this is the aircraft that is gathering information, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it is basically a replacement, not the best replacement, for ground radar that the Iranians destroyed. So now the United States has to rely upon these AWACS instead of the ground radar. So that's a problem, because normally they would have the ground radar would have told him everything, the locations where the PMF is firing from. So that's what that AWACS was doing, trying to identify the firing positions of the PMF, and that could then become, they'd pass that information to the Saudis, and the Saudis would ostensibly use it to carry out attacks on those sites in Iraq.
The attack, Yemenis attacked Saudi Arabia last night again, and it was in response to Saudi Turkish drones going to Yemen, gathering information, and they attacked Saudi again.
Right.
How?
I mean, that's like I said, the Houthis and the PMF allies are not going to give up, and so this will broaden the war, and put then Saudi Arabia more in the crosshairs. And the Saudis, they bombed. I think the PMF bombed another refinery site inside Saudi Arabia. I've likened it to. So let's say you got two people that are fighting. One person lives in a glass house. That's Saudi Arabia. The PMF lives in a brick house. Now, they're in a rock. They're attacking each other with rocks. Well, who's going to have a better chance of breaking windows with rocks, the PMF or the Saudis? Well, clearly the PMF. The Saudis they're living metaphorically in a glass house, and they can't stop the PMF from throwing rocks and breaking their glass houses.
Yeah. The Turkish foreign minister responded, Larry. He was asked about Saudi Arabia and its position in the ongoing conflict. He said that when we talk to Saudi Arabia regarding Iran, they don't have an intention to say things like, let's wage war on Iran, let's destroy Iran, let's do this and that in Iran. They have different opinion on this matter. MBS, in his recent conversation with Trump, shared the view that this war must stop as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that military intervention against Iran is in no way a solution. And that this issue should be resolved through dialogue and agreement. This is the same tone that we hear from the Iranians as well. They said that Saudi Arabia is in contact with them, talking the same way as Fidan, the foreign minister of Turkey, was just mentioning his sort of understanding of Saudi Arabia. But this is one part. On the other hand, you see the conflict with Yemen, with Iraq, as you mentioned. And you see the mainstream media, New York Times, for example, reporting that Saudi Arabia wants to, they didn't want this, during the war, they were trying to picture Saudi Arabia as one of the main countries supporting the war. And what is the position of Saudi Arabia, putting these two sides, two different sides, by the way? One side says Saudi Arabia is prepared. Donald Trump said that in his last, sort of thought. He said they did everything to support us. They supported us. They prepared. They provided us with everything. Who's telling us the truth?
Well, there can be two truths. The Saudis are caught in this battle with Ansar Allah, and for whatever reason, they won't let it go. And so Ansar Allah is going to keep punching back at them. But I think that the true intent of that Mecca agreement was ultimately aimed at Israel, not at Iran, and certainly not at the Houthis. Because if it was, then you'd see Pakistan and Turkey coming out being very forceful and condemning the Houthis, and then moving military assets against them. there's no way that Turkey and Pakistan present more military power than a U.S. carrier strike group. So the U.S. carrier strike group already tried to defeat the Houthis and failed. And so if they think that this is going to come out in a different way, they're kidding themselves.
We know that Ukraine, together with Europeans, they're coming together to produce interceptors or missiles for the air defense system. Do you see Israel being part of that, or asking to do something?
Well, they're trying it, but again, their systems are crap. They get a lot of Western propaganda about how powerful the Israelis are militarily, but they're not.
Who's paying right now for those weapons that Ukraine is producing? We know that Donald Trump is making money out of the situation in Ukraine, but he's not paying anything, to my understanding.
Yep. No, I mean, that's true. They are, and more of it's coming out of Europe, I think. But again, there are weapons, supposedly they're going to provide some more PAC-3 missiles. From where? They don't have them to provide. They're it's like providing unicorns. You can conceive of them, but it's a mythological creature. And at this point, ample supplies of PAC-3 missiles for that air defense system, the Patriot, that's also mythical.
Larry, we have a new report. Iran has hit an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. And the fight is happening. One of them is, we have two stories again with the case of the Strait of Hormuz. The United States somehow telling us that the strait is open, and you see these attacks are still happening. And
Strait's open, sort of, for who? Well, it's not open, and Iran still controls it.
No, let me bring the footage here, and you can see it's huge. What has happened? Oman, today we've learned, Larry, from the Iranian foreign minister, he said that the talks with Oman are happening and they're getting to the point to achieve the final agreement. And that doesn't mean that the United States is going to get anything out of that. It means that it's not going to, this is...
Is that the ship on fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks pretty ugly.
It's the fire is just, it's Oman, by the way. It's important. It's off the coast of Oman. Remember how the things.
I mean, and again, I'm sure the Iranians in these negotiations are telling the Omanis, "Hey, look, this is how this system's going to work. Anybody that wants to come through here, they've got to file with us. Name of the ship, ship's captain, country of who owns the ship, destination, cargo, nationality of the crew. Those 6 things. Got to provide all that. Anybody provides that, we'll review it. We just want to make sure that there's no ship that's affiliated with Israel or the United States that's transiting that Omani passage. And if they try, we're gonna blow them up. Everybody else, they'll be able to go through. Just file the paperwork. So I'm sure I've got to assume, I can't cite new specific information, but I have to assume that the insurance companies are saying, yeah, we're not going to insure ships. So you got to what we don't know is who are the owners of these ships. To what country do they really belong to? That would be a critical question, because we don't have a name of that ship yet, do we?
No, we don't have it. What do you make of the new argument of Scott Bessent talking about in the next 2 years we're going to resolve the situation with the Strait of Hormuz, not opening up the Strait of Hormuz by building new pipelines, underground pipelines to resolve the issue of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Oh, 2 years. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's not going to, the global economy will be just swell. I mean, it's stupid. They think, and the pipeline from where to where? Where's he talking about building the pipeline?
I assume he's talking about Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, all these using the underground pipelines that they're going to build. Maybe some, he said in 2 years, we're going to be.
But where's the terminal? Where do they terminate?
I know he didn't mention any of this.
Yeah, important detail.
Yeah, he didn't mention, but he said that the problem would be resolved, because finally the whole case of the. Let me just bring it up here. I want to show the clip in which he's talking about this. His argument is, because right now the main agenda on their part is to show the people that the strait is not that important. If you don't open up the Strait of Hormuz, we can do something else. So we can reduce the importance of the strait. This is what's going on with Scott Bessent. Let me just, I don't know when. Yeah, it's here.
The strait will never go back to being the way it was before. What would you say?
I think they're saying that in a doomsday sort of way. I would say it in another way. The strait is never going back to the way it was because the Iranians have used or tried to use it as a choke point. What we are going to see over the next 2 years, the strait's going to become irrelevant. It is going to become just another body of water. And I would say that more than 50 or 70% of the energy that moves through the strait now is going to go through underground pipelines.
Jesus. God, for the love of God, how can a man he's not an intelligent man, but that is so incredibly stupid. Because it's not just the oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf that's critical to the global supply. It's the liquid natural gas. They're going to build a pipeline for that. What about the pipeline for sulfur and the pipeline for urea and the pipeline for helium? Sulfur, urea, helium are as important to the global economy as is oil. It's not as sort of, you cut oil, you can see immediate consequences, but the depletion of urea and sulfur, which play, urea and sulfur together play a critical role with fertilizer. And so you're down already a significant, major global shortage in fertilizer. And then sulfur also has a prominent role in a variety of industrial processes. And then the helium. You need helium in order to produce computer chips. And there's a shortage on that front. Now, they've succeeded so far in doing some workarounds, but that still hasn't prevented some significant price rises in the cost of computer chips now coming out. So, yeah, Bessent's he's talking about one segment. He's ignoring, one of 5 segments. He's ignoring the other 4. God bless America.
We, as you know, before coming to live, we've learned that the head of national security, the Supreme National Security Council in Iran was, they put I told you, the military advisor to the Supreme Leader of Iran, Mohsen Rezai. He's right now the head of National Security Council in Iran, and the previous one is going to be the advisor of the Supreme Leader. What does that mean?
Okay, look. So Mohammed is it Mohammed Bakr Zolqadar?
Yeah, no, Muhammad Baqir Zulqadr.
Zolqadr. Okay, I'll work.
Zulqadr. Yeah, it's difficult for you to
Zulqadr.
pronounce that. It's
Zulqadr. Zulqadr.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. You're so good.
Zulqadr. Okay, so he has been the secretary of the National Security Council.
Exactly.
He's leaving.
Yeah, he's leaving.
Pezeshkian accepted his resignation, and apparently the insistence of Muqtada Khamenei.
Yeah.
And in his stead, they appointed Major General Mohsen Rezai.
Yeah.
So
Mohsen Rezai. This guy is Zulqadr, Larry. This guy here is Zulqadr. And he was replaced by, the new.
So Zulqadr, is he military?
Yeah. His former IRGC was part of the army, IRGC, not army. And here is the new one who's replacing him, Mohsen Rezai, which was, he was the military advisor to the supreme leader of Iran. And he's also Bakhtiari. He's a lawyer. He's part of the,
Okay, we'll forgive him for that.
Exactly. But after all, I think what's important is that the position of Iran would be, they're going to go to the right. It's not going to go to the left. It's not going to be more easy for the United States to deal with.
Do you know anything about the reputation of the guy that's being replaced? What was?
Yeah, he was the head of IRGC, one of the most important during the Iran-Iraq war. He was so important. He has a PhD in economics, and he was the head of He was one of the closest friends of Ali Larijani, the head of national security, who was assassinated. So close. These two were so close. And right now he has total experience. For 8 years, he was totally involved in war against Iraq. And he was part of the hardcore of IRGC since day one. Since before the creation of IRGC, he was part of.
But back then, so looking at him, so he was only in his late 20s, early 30s.
No, this is, let me just
during the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah, it's a 2020, something like 19, 20, 22 years old, 22-year-old. Yeah, during those days.
So he was a very, very young guy.
He was, if I'm not mistaken, he had 24 when he was the head of IRGC during the Iran-Iraq war. Just imagine that.
Okay.
It's crazy these days thinking of those conditions.
Not a lot of experience. But now, so now he is an experienced guy. It'd be interesting to find out why he was replaced.
I assume that
something he did. Is it that he's tired, that he wants to retire?
I don't know the details. It seems to me that it was appointed by the head by the Iranian supreme leader, and we know Rezai, he has more sort of military point of view. Whenever it comes to the management of the Strait of Hormuz, we have never heard from Zulqadr talking about the Strait of Hormuz militarily. But every time we hear someone coming to the media, mainstream media in Iran, talking about the Strait of Hormuz, it was Rezai, the new head. It was Rezai all talking about the situation with the Strait, how we can go, it says, how we can do this and we can do that. And it was all, but right now, being the head of National Security Council, I think that's a message. And for the United States, that they're not going to back down on any sort of those lines that were mentioned 2 days ago, which is about all fronts, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen.
Right.
They're going to double down on that, in my opinion. That's the message.
Mm-hmm.
This is the recipe that it seems that we're not going to get anything out of talks, negotiation, and messages. Because it seems Pakistan is still feeling that they can get something out of these messages back and forth. And
yeah, I don't know. Reportedly the Pakistanis claim that they're dealing directly with Mustafa. Well, so I take some of those claims with a grain of salt.
I can tell you, I can confirm that there is no connection. Nobody has the direct connection outside of Iran with the Iranian supreme leader. And the only one, we had Iranian president after, I would say days, after weeks, meeting with the supreme leader of Iran. And yesterday, he met with him. And he described the economy of the country, the way that the war is going on. He prepared a report for him, and he went there and talked with him. I think this outcome of the new head of the National Security Council is one of those main topics that were discussed with the Iranian supreme leader. And the other point, Larry, is Israel. You've mentioned, that Benjamin Netanyahu is doubling down. We know that there is a document between Palestinians and Israelis that Donald Trump and his administration, together with the board of peace or whatever that would be, they have a 15-point document that Israel said. He said, Benjamin Netanyahu said, I want to be precise, Israel rejects the 15-point document. I heard people saying that you didn't say it. We said it, but here I am saying it again. Israel rejects the 15-point plan. He said it doesn't matter, how the United States is feeling about it. We're not going to change our position when it comes to Gaza. They're basically, it means, Larry, they want to keep with that yellow line. They're talking about 80%, and their people are pushing more than 80%. They want to occupy.
Yeah, what an incredibly stupid thing for Israel to do. Because, and I'm sure Netanyahu's doing it for political reasons. With associated with the election, that he's going to be a tough guy on this. I don't, this was sort of Donald Trump's new baby. And baby's calling Donald Trump's baby ugly. You show me a mother that lets some other stranger call their baby ugly, that mother will beat him up. And I wouldn't be surprised that this could potentially, we'll find out if it should enrage Trump. And it should lead Trump to say, okay, Bibi, you want to play that way? We'll play that way. We'll see who controls what. And because, Netanyahu to reject that peace plan, because it puts Trump's credibility completely on the line. And essentially Bibi saying, yo, Don, you're my bitch. You can't tell me what to do. Oh, really? And we'll see if Trump puts up with that.
How do you see, Larry, the way that China is just sitting back and watching the United States doing this in the West Asia, in Ukraine?
Why do you think they're sitting back?
It's the best fight ever for China, in my opinion.
No, I don't see China sitting back. I see China is working behind the scenes to try to promote a peaceful outcome. I think China was directly involved with the signing of that, Mecca accord between Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. But it's no guarantee that they will fulfill that pledge. But the purpose of that was to start to create this new security architecture that ostensibly all security issues in the Persian Gulf would be under the control of the Muslims. And the last step to be taken is, are they going to bring in Iran to that agreement? That would be the smart thing to do. They bring it in, then all of a sudden it makes clear that this is targeted at protecting the Muslims from attacks by the United States and by Israel.
Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan said that once Iran resolves its problems, they need Iran. Iran is needed. He was talking about the agreement, the military pact. I assume that the problems is that mostly it's talking about the animosity, sort of enmity between Iran and the United States. That's not going to go away anytime soon. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, no. I agree. I don't see that happening.
No. Because one should be delusional to think that these two even not fighting each other, just tomorrow, let's assume tomorrow they're going to come out with some sort of resolution for the war. But it's not going to resolve the issue between Iran and the United States. This is so deep down. I don't understand it, Larry. Do you think that's part of the establishment? I was watching one of these two groups of people in Iran. We have the reformists, we have the two sides that usually have in Iran, the reformists and the conservatives, I would say this way. And when they're talking about the United States, somehow I assume they're missing a lot when it comes to the strategy of the United States. They see the United States.
Okay, stop for a second. I need to clarify. Who's missing a lot? You mean the reformers?
The two sides in Iran, political parties in Iran.
Okay, what do you mean they're missing? What are they missing?
So much talking about this senator said that congressman said that, this one. The same thing that I hear from Russians, those Russians who feel that they can play with the United States, they can resolve the problems with the United States.
Well, okay. But let's go back and look at who's actually reporting this.
I saw one of the talks between two of the thinkers on the two sides, the conservative and the reformist side. And I saw I see both sides somehow being delusional about what's going on with the reality between Iran and the United States. It's much deeper than the way they're talking about it. They're talking about this discussion, and Obama was different from Joe Biden. Joe Biden is different from Donald Trump. But what is that? How do you see the roots of the problem between Iran and the United States? What is that root, in your opinion, in the United States?
Oh, it's still we're. If you've known a couple that were in a relationship, they're married, and then they have an ugly divorce, and no matter how much time passes, the anger of one spouse against the other persists. That's what's going on here with the United States and Iran. I mean, good Lord, this goes all the way back to, the Iranian Revolution and the overthrow of the Shah. The United States is not forgiving that at all. They still hold a grudge with respect to that. So, I guess the real question is, I'm not sure that in Iran you have the kind of division that what you're talking about. That's being portrayed by the Western press, correct?
No, I was watching the Iranian media. I wanted to know what is the understanding on the part of these two main groups in Iran, the reformists and conservatives. I wanted to know what is happening. What I watched, and maybe because it's been a while that I'm outside of Iran, I don't have that much of connection like before. But I don't understand what they're talking about, basically, when it comes to the United States. There's so much.
So who's the leader? Who's the leader of the reformists?
It's not the leader. I'm not talking about the leaders because we don't have the lead. You know, you cannot say this is the leader of the reformists like the United States. It's not that much. You know, you have some parties, they are all together, the reformists. You have some parties inside that we can call all of them, you know, all together, you know, conservatives. It's not like the United States, two distinct parties fighting each other. It's somehow different. You see multiple parties going together, and the understanding, my understanding is that they have, you know, most of them, these people who are talking, basically they're watching, you know, when it comes to the Senate, to the Congress, all the discussions that are happening in the United States, they're so much informed about what's going on in the United States. But when it comes to the relationship between Iran and the United States, some of them are arguing, for example, Obama was different. Obama was doing this and that. Biden is this. And the problem right now is Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is somehow different from other candidates. But we've seen JCPOA was signed during the Obama administration.
Right.
Then Donald Trump came in and with
and Trump broke it. So,
and then Joe Biden did nothing. Joe Biden was part of that JCPOA together with Anthony Blinken during the Obama administration. 4 years they did nothing to get back to the JCPOA. They had the opportunity to get back.
Okay, right. So, but I don't understand. So, where do you think is the confusion?
The confusion is on the part of Iranians. I don't understand the Iranians when they're talking about that Joe Biden and Obama are different from Donald Trump. Because if Joe Biden wanted to get back to JCPOA,
but when you say Iranians, you're talking about just one or two people that have been on television.
Yeah,
correct?
Exactly. 1-2 people. I'm not talking about the Iranian government. No.
So, but are those
the
people
Iranian
really?
Government is different.
But Nima, are those people that are going on television? Do they have a popular base? Are they considered?
They are.
Okay. Who's going on television saying that? Let's be specific.
No, I cannot name them because I don't want to be.
No, but seriously, you're going to make those kinds of broad judgments. Let's boil it down. Let's be specific, because I can show you on American television when somebody says something. Okay, it's one thing if it's Jack Keane or if it's General Kellogg. Well, they don't really have a broad base of support. They've got a very narrow base of support. But because they get on television and say it, it's perceived as having much more influence than is actually the case. And that's
but
what
they're
I'm trying
representing the two sides of the extremes.
Okay, but I'm saying, okay, who are these people that are representing those sides?
And they're academics. They're academics.
Okay.
They're not part of the government. They're not in the government.
Not to insult you as an academic, but academics don't make policy. Academics are notorious for having opinions, but that aren't reflected in the government. If anything, what this shows is that there is freedom of expression in Iran, correct?
Yeah.
That the government, that these people make those claims and they're not then being drug out of the studio and hung from a crane.
No.
They're not being arrested. They're not being arrested.
That's a very distorted picture of Iran. And
that's my point. That's my point. It is distorted. I'm just saying the way the West perceives it is they make the claim that there's no freedom of expression in Iran. The mullahs rule with an iron hand. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And what you're telling me here is, well, their iron hand ain't too tough, because you've got these people that are allowed to go on television and make arguments that would appear to oppose the government policy, correct?
Yeah. Not the government policy. They talk about everything. Most harshest way possible.
They're critical of the government.
Yeah. They're critical of the government. From the left and right.
Yeah, and it's just saying, okay, in Iran, there is freedom of expression.
Yeah, it's
Right?
a lot. It's a lot, Larry. My experience was when I got back to Iran, I saw the difference from 12 years ago, for example, 13 years ago. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And you see the discussions that the people are talking and the way they're criticizing everything.
Unbelievable in what sense? What do you mean? How was it
The way that
unbelievable?
harshly, not just talking about, because the people, when you say for example, this government and that government, they say that these are authorities, nobody's talking about against the government, making any sort of, that's not the case at all. All.
And so, I mean, it goes back to my basic point that all of this is illustrating is that in Iran, you are allowed so far to have different views and views that are in opposition to the government, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Okay. Yeah. But the real issue ought to come down within the government. Is there a split, or within the government is there unity? I would argue within the government there is total unity. That regardless, you may have people in the government that previously may have opposed some of the policies, but right now they are united in terms of the United States is a threat. It's an enemy. It's not an entity that has the welfare or well-being of Iranians at heart.
Exactly. That's the case. There is no division anymore. There were some sort of divisions before, I would say, before the war started. Somehow, not that much, but right now it's so much united. Everything. Basically, you have two sort of movements right now in Iran. One says that we have to fight till the end. The other one says, no, we can fight. We can talk as well. If they want to talk, we talk. If they want to fight, we fight. But the other side says, no, it doesn't matter. The United States has proven that they're not going to talk. They're not going to resolve the issue with these negotiations. Let's fight to the end. The only difference is this. It's not in the government, by the way. I'm talking about the academics again. I'm talking about the people outside of the government. And so
that's what academics do. Yeah, because they get the luxury of offering opinions, but they don't have to actually make policy.
Yeah. Let me, Larry, bring something different on it, which is Taiwan. The case of Taiwan is accelerating plans to build large fleets of aerial and marine attack drone designed to help repel a potential Chinese invasion, drawing heavily on lessons from Ukraine. This was reported on New York Times.
Now, repeat that again. Repeat that. What did the Times report?
New York Times reported today.
But who? The United States is building?
No, it says Taiwan is accelerating plans to build large fleet. It means the United States. I don't see Taiwan be that much capable.
Right. Yeah. The Chinese are not, in my judgment, going to resolve the issue with Taiwan through military means. They won't have to. They'll be able to do it economically through their economic power, because the entire Taiwanese fantasy is predicated upon an assumption that the United States is more powerful than China and that the United States can protect Taiwan. I asked the Taiwanese people, how'd that work out for Ukraine? How'd that work out for Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait? Not good. The United States couldn't protect them. Why do they think the United States could protect them against China?
I assume they have learned nothing from Ukraine, because it seems that they're using Ukrainian tactics to go against China.
Yeah.
How amazing that could be for Taiwan.
Sort of a flat learning curve. Yeah, if you had students like that, you give them an F. You know, failure to learn.
Let me just tell you before wrapping up. I have students, who usually everything that I teach, it's all about the calculations, nothing about describing this and that. The story behind this and that. It's all about calculation, the numbers.
Yeah.
And there are students who, instead of resolving the question, the problem, they're just writing, sentences and sentences describing the whole and resolving nothing. This is what Taiwan is trying to do, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good comparison.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry. Tomorrow,
man, that's quick. That went by fast.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I abused you. I normally at this hour I would have abused Mario. So I'm being abusive to you. Oh, okay. Maybe I'm not.
Larry, see you tomorrow
when?
at 5 p.m.
5 tomorrow. So we're not doing the morning.
No, at 5 p.m. We're going to keep it at 5 p.m.
Oh, boy. I get to have breakfast late.
Yeah.
All right. Good choice on the shirt today.
Yeah. You too. It's just shining, beautiful. Believe me, it's so beautiful.
All right, my friend.
See you tomorrow.
Go play with your kids. Stop working so hard.
Yeah.
Back, Syed Mohammed Marandi joins us today, a professor from Tehran University and a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team. Thank you for taking the time on a Sunday morning to speak with me.
It's always a pleasure, Glenn. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So we see a lot of things having happened over the past, 24 plus hours. That is, first, Iran attacked a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, which caused a lot of outrage, especially from the UAE. And we see also reports of the Iranians being more vocal on their demands against the United States. That is, they should pay compensation for what they have destroyed, remove the blockade on Iran. Beyond this, of course, we have all this other diplomatic developments as well. That is the Saudi, Turkey, Pakistan defense pact. We have the Oman-Iran deal. We have the U.S.-Saudi nuclear deal, not finalized. But what do you make sense of all these developments? Because things appear to be moving fast ahead. We can start with the new attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, how can we understand what is happening now?
It's just another normal day in West Asia. So the situation is unlike what the Americans want to believe. It's not good for the United States at all, and the Iranians are now showing that they're not going to allow oil to be, or any other goods to be exported from the Persian Gulf region without Iran's consent. And they've had a specific, it seems to me, a project of targeting UAE ships. So they've struck at least, I don't know exactly how many now, but a number of UAE tankers over the past few days. And remember, a while back, Trump made that Truth Social threat where every time Iran strikes a ship, they'll destroy some Iranian critical infrastructure, a bridge, or a power plant. But Iran has been striking these tankers since then and blocking any sort of exports from even the Emirates, including from Fujairah, which is outside the Strait of Hormuz. And we see the same situation in the Red Sea. The Yemeni armed forces are blocking Saudi ships. This morning there was another strike on the Jazan refinery. The pressure is on. The pressure is continuing, and the as time goes by, the global energy crisis is getting worse, and the Iranians are, they know exactly what's going on, and it's not just the leaders. I mean, I rarely go on Iranian TV, but last night I went, and I began explaining my views on the region, and I thought I'd speak a bit about Japan. And then as soon as I said a couple of words, the host, he interacted with me. It was clear he knew exactly what was going on and the threat to the bond market in the United States. And this is how closely events in the United States, events in the West are being followed. People know exactly what's going on in general terms, of course, not they know. A lot of people know as much as I, if not more. So they know about the midterm elections. They know what's going on in the Democratic Party. They know what's going on in the Republican Party. They know what Tucker Carlson and his political allies are doing. So it shows how carefully monitored the situation is political wise. And I think that Iran's military and political actions are carried out with an eye on what's going on in the United States, and it's internally, but also internationally. So yes, the Emirates are very upset, but there's nothing they can do about it, and there's nothing that the United States can do about it. The Saudis are very upset because now they are in the same boat as Qatar and the Emirates and Kuwait. They can't export much from the Red Sea. They can't export from the Persian Gulf. And remember, you know better than I, of course, that these are countries that consume a lot. They are not like Iran, which has lived under maximum pressure sanctions and sanctions for decades. The consumption in Saudi Arabia, the consumer in Saudi Arabia is used to spending like there's no tomorrow, and across the Persian Gulf region. And that is going to have an added impact in the sense that not only are the hopes of Trump to bring in trillions of dollars from the milked dictators, family regimes in the Persian Gulf for the U.S. economy, but now it's going to be the opposite. These countries are going to have to withdraw money from the United States. They're going to have to sell bonds in the U.S. market in order to sustain their economies, in order to sustain the country, in order to repair the damage that has been done and the ongoing damage that is being caused. And again, as I said before, the costs are enormous, especially for these societies which are extremely wasteful and need huge quantities of money just to sustain themselves. So, from the way I see it, is that the Iranians are playing a waiting game, and they're going to put as much pressure on the other side as possible, and try to tolerate the pain inflicted on Iran as much as possible, outweigh the United States, and based on past experiences since the war began, they have every right to be optimistic. The 40-day or 39-day war, I never figured out how long it was a massive failure for the United States. Not a single Iranian underground base was destroyed. Not a single underground Iranian base was damaged throughout the country. And some of those bases were never used and are still not being used. But it just shows how capable the Iranian armed forces are today, because the Iranians have been fighting a war for the 21st century against the Americans who are fighting a 20th century war. U.S. bases, Israeli assets, assets of the regimes in the region that were assisting the United States, all of them were out in the open, while all key Iranian assets were deep underground. Whether it's the factories, whether it's the missile bases, the drone bases, the bases that hold Iranian naval speedboats, the bases that hold protect the Iran's air force, the bases that protect Iran's air defense systems, and other bases, command and control, and bases alongside the Persian Gulf that were created in case the United States carries out a land invasion. All of these are protected while Iran goes one by one and destroys U.S. assets on the ground. So I think it's quite clear why the Iranians would have that patience. And then you see the siege warfare. The United States tried to strangle Iran. Ultimately, it was the United States that had to agree to the MOU. And now we saw the statement by the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, reinforcing the MOU, but it's sort of an MOU plus. These are not new demands. Some people seem to think that these are new demands or excessive demands. No, they're maximalizing the MOU. And as I said before to you on a number of occasions, for example, in Article 1, when it speaks of Lebanon, it also speaks of the other fronts. It doesn't name them, but in this statement, they're named. Palestine, Yemen, Iraq, these wars must come to an end. And of course, it means both Gaza and the West Bank. So the demands of the Iranians are not new demands, but they are saying we're not going to compromise on anything. When it comes to compensation, the Iranians demand full compensation. That is in the MOU, but the stress that is being put on these issues now is basically to send a message to the United States that we are not only are we not going to compromise on the MOU, we are going to maximize our demands within the framework of the MOU.
Yeah, I always think that the U.S. Lost something quite important in the war against Iran. That is, during the post-Cold War era of U.S. hegemony, the main perception of the United States, rooted in facts, I would say, was that it was all powerful. That is, the main perception that you can't challenge the United States. It kept all countries at bay, and this was a huge resource for the U.S. But now, with every attack on Iran, you see the weapons stockpile driven down, which means there's whoever is the opponent of the U.S. would have better cards to play, and also the deterrence that is in the past, as Trump always screams out, or on Twitter, is that if anyone dares to attack the U.S., well, we're gonna blow up your country and destroy your civilization tomorrow if you dare to retaliate. But again, this pushback from Iran as well. We now see that there's not much the U.S. can do really, short of nuking Iran. But it is interesting what they gambled on this war. Again, it's not just the Strait of Hormuz; it's regional partnerships. But it does seem that the economy, though, I'm wondering what the economic ripple effects would be from this, because in July, we see that the crude oil exported by Saudi Arabia to the US, it dropped to zero, we're told. I mean, it's hard to calculate the kind of economic and political repercussions this will have. Well, first of all, Saudi Arabia will be destabilized. It's energy it's as far as money inflow, but also where it invests money into the US. I mean, the US needs this as well. It's the tech industry, which US is in an AI race with the Chinese. It needs its funding, the petrodollar system. Everything comes under a massive squeeze. So it's I think in the future this will be a key theme for academics. See exactly what the US gambled and lost on this war. I did want to ask about this new defense pact, because we see Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan all form this defense pact. All of them, of course, they are more or less surrounding Iran. That being said, they have very different interests and very different motivations. I was wondering, to what extent is Iran a target, or the reasoning behind this, and to what extent should the Iranians worry, or how might they react? Sorry, big question.
Sure, no problem at all. Just before answering that, a couple of years ago, I don't know, maybe in one of our first discussions, I said that I always believe that the collapse of the Soviet Union and the victory of the United States over Saddam Hussein in Kuwait was the worst thing that could happen to the United States. And that is because it created an arrogance that basically led to the swift collapse of the U.S. empire. The ghosts of Vietnam were swept away after Iraq, and it was the unipolar moment. And then came the invasion of Iraq, 9/11, which, when you look at the evidence being put forth by the likes of Tucker Carlson, it's obviously not just Al Qaeda and those 19 people who were involved. It doesn't look like that at all. It looks like it was much broader, and that agencies linked to the West or Western agencies were also involved. But in any case, since then, the United States has been rapidly declining. And this war is the exact opposite of what we saw in Kuwait. In Kuwait, there was a stunning victory, and now we see just 2 decades later plus, or 3 decades later plus, you see that the exact opposite, that the United States fought a battle and or fought a war, and it failed. In fact, the 40 days of fighting, or 40 days of fighting, is similar to the time it took to defeat Saddam Hussein in Kuwait. I think that was 43 days or so. Maybe I'm mistaken. But I think that that actually turned out to be horrible for the United States, because the United States changed. It became aggressive, extremely aggressive, and that destroyed it. And a lot of that destruction, again, has to do with Iran, because when the United States invaded Afghanistan, Iran gradually, and Iraq, Iran began to work with the resistance. In Afghanistan, Iran began to work with the Taliban. I mean, the first generation of the Taliban was they were horrible, and they were carrying out mass murder and slaughter. But after they collapsed in Afghanistan, the second generation became more moderate. We still have big differences with education, women's education, and women's rights, and that's a big divide. But the relationship has evolved tremendously. And Iran supported the Taliban to weaken the U.S. occupation. And ironically, it has angered many people among the minorities in the Shia, the Tajik, the Persian language speakers, the Uzbeks, who are all opposed to the Taliban. But for Iran, the priority was to expel the empire from the region. And if the Iranians believe that if the empire is expelled, then the situation in Afghanistan will calm down, because there's no foreign manipulator to turn community against one another, one nation against another. And the same was true in Syria. The Iranians supported the Syrian government to oppose the U.S. project and the Israeli project, which sadly regional regimes participated in. But the same model took place in Iraq. In Iraq and in Afghanistan, Iran pushed back. It was General Soleimani behind both, and that led to the United States to leave, and they had spent trillions of dollars. So then, to a large degree, the U.S. failure against Iran in this war is linked to the U.S. failure in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They had to move away from Iranian borders. They spent trillions of dollars, became much weaker. The American people became, the economy became weaker. The American people became much more skeptical about these forever wars. And so, if it wasn't for Iran supporting the resistance against the empire in Afghanistan, in Syria, and in Iraq, and Lebanon, and elsewhere in Yemen, then today it would have been a very different situation. The Americans would have been able to come forward with much greater strength. And also, I would add, and I'm not saying that Iran foresaw all of this, but Iran's support for Russia during the war, because Iran saw the expansion of NATO as a threat to itself as well. It was not just Ukraine, but it was also Georgia, and then of course Armenia and Azerbaijan would be next. So we already had Turkey as a NATO member, and then these added to it would have been a major, would have made the threat even greater for Iran. So Iran's support for the Russians during the war also helped destroy a lot of the assets that NATO gave to Ukraine and weakened NATO economically, militarily. Many of those air defense systems that were used in Ukraine, that benefited Iran. And of course, right now, the war in West Asia helps Russia. When the United States is forced to spend money on multiple fronts and waste its assets in multiple fronts, it benefits Iran and Russia. But with regards to the three leaders gathering in Saudi Arabia, the Turkish leader, the Pakistani leader, and Mohammed bin Salman, I think it's pretty clear that this is about Yemen. It's about the weakening position of Saudi Arabia. These countries did not gather over Gaza. They didn't gather over Lebanon. They didn't gather over the Israeli advancements in Syria, and they didn't gather over the horrific situation that's taking place in the West Bank. It is about Saudi Arabia being severely weakened because of its own policies. The Saudis helped the United States attack Iran. They co-conspired with the Americans against the Iranian people. They acted as the U.S. Air Base, the country. Not only did they provide airspace, they provided air bases. Not only did they provide air bases, they provided jet fuel. They provided everything that the Americans needed. They paid for the U.S. war as well. So all of the expenditures of the United States and Saudi Arabia during this period were paid for by the Saudis and Qatar and the Emirates as well. They paid for the U.S. presence, and that's true about Kuwait. So the expenditures on these bases, were paid for by these governments. It was so much that some of them were facing financial difficulty as a result. So Saudi Arabia helped the United States against Iran. They were part of the war. And then they went and provoked Yemen. They bombed Yemen at a time when they had imposed a siege. And the siege on Yemen had been going on for years. And then they bombed, of course, Iraq, falsely blaming Iraq for drone strikes, which were carried out by Yemen. And Yemen, again, today has carried out further drone strikes. But so it was basically for Saudi Arabia, nothing more. They tried to give it a a different spin, but that's what it was. But I don't think it really matters too much for the Iranians. I mean, just today we saw a Yemen strike. Jazan, the Jazan refinery again, and they will continue to do so. And I don't see these countries getting involved against Yemen. It doesn't look good for them at all. They can, because people will remember that Yemen, first of all, for years the Saudis, with the support of Turkey and other countries in the region, they carried out a genocidal war against Yemen, but they failed. They imposed. It was like Gaza. They imposed starvation. The Saudis and Qatar were supporting it until the siege on Qatar. Then Qatar and Turkey tilted away from Saudi Arabia, but they were supporting it. But they failed. And Yemen today is much stronger than it was back then, and Saudi Arabia is much weaker than it was back then. So I don't really see them having capabilities to stop Yemen from striking Saudi ships or Saudi refineries or oil installations. So they don't have anything that the United States didn't have. And of course, so many of those munitions are depleted now. Those anti-missile, anti-drone munitions that the United States has been bragging about. We are all hearing the news and seeing the news about the current shortages. And also, in the past, Yemen has a history of wrecking the ambitions of other countries. Egypt under in the 1960s under Jamal Abdel Nasser, they invaded Yemen, and it was their Vietnam, and that's part of the reason why they failed so badly against the Israeli regime, because they had expended so much of their capabilities in Yemen. So I don't see this agreement as signifying much. It's Pakistan had this arrangement with Saudi Arabia more or less before. There are financial issues that lie behind this for Pakistan, military sales for Turkey, but they may try to do some things with Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying that they'll be completely. It's just a piece of paper that's been signed, but I don't think it's going to have any major impact on Yemen's capabilities or the capabilities of the resistance in Iraq. And of course, Iran defeated the combined forces of the United States and the Israeli regime. So I don't think that Iran is worried about any piece of paper signed in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your comments on hegemony. That is, why the collapse of the Soviet Union was also problematic for the U.S. It's people like Stephen Walt. They wrote a lot about this. That is, if you're a hegemon and there's no balance, or he was always making the point that the greatest challenge for the U.S. is that states don't constrain themselves. Essentially, that the U.S. would no longer be balanced; it would go out in every direction and exhaust itself and make a lot of enemies. This was the argument in the 1990s, and you can see why. That is, if you're a hegemon, unconstrained, you can do anything, and you can absorb the cost of this military adventurism. So essentially, this is a perfect condition for the rise of the hawks, when they say, well, why shouldn't we have military solutions for everything? Who can stop us? And that's what you saw already from in the 1990, 1981. And but then you're going to see predictable developments. That is, decline of diplomacy, decline of fiscal discipline, the moral compass will be thrown out. There will be a collapse in the trust of the political class, and that's one exhausts itself economically. You will also have political instability, and eventually the rising rivals at the periphery will begin to get closer together. The Chinese, Russians, Iranians, because they realize this is not a functioning international system, and once the hegemon begins to decline, it will be desperate to hold on to power, and that's when you will see extremely foolish policies. So the war in Iran, war in Russia, economic war in China. So I think a lot of this would be predictable. Of course, if you say that, actually the best thing in the U.S. interest now is to accommodate a multipolar system where it can retrench. You're often met by arguments. Oh, that's anti-American. You want to give more space for the Chinese and the Russians. This is, in my opinion, this is the medicine the U.S. needs to restore itself, go back to normalcy. But it's a very difficult argument to make in this day of age when everything is emotional sloganeering. Anyways, I take your point on this, the Turkey, Saudi, Pakistani defense pact that, we shouldn't expect to see collective defense right away. But we also hear now that the deal between Oman and Iran might be in its final stages. Again, I'm not sure if we should take these media reports with a grain of salt, but I do hear that from other places as well. How significant would this be, and also what would such a deal actually include? I guess you don't have it in front of you, but what can we expect being the main points here?
Well, just a couple of points. First, one is with regards to the United States. I agree with what you said completely. And even now, as all the indicators show that things are not going well at all, you still see that this myth of American exceptionalism still exists. You don't see any change in U.S. policy, which of course is linked to corruption. The money that's going to the military-industrial complex and their lack of any ability to reform because they're making huge amounts of money and so on. I mean, the leadership is increasingly corrupt, manipulating the markets, and then benefiting from it directly. Their families, their allies, all that is true. But that the myth is still they still behave as if nothing will actually run out. This can do, we can win. Somehow we will come out on top. That continues to push the United States towards the cliff, whether it's economic or political or military. It's just moving forward. And I think by the time they'll really figure it out, even though they're seeing it, they have the evidence in front of them, it'll be too late. And I think we're pretty close to that moment. But others know this. Others are looking objectively. The Iranians are calculating very carefully. The Russians are calculating carefully. The Chinese, everyone is calculating very carefully. And U.S. allies, I think they are beginning to recognize that this is, they're in a very dangerous situation, these proxies, because none of them have any popular support. They don't have any mandate by their people to be U.S. proxies. And so that undermines their own authority, because when that aura of power is gone, it is also gone for the proxies too. And so even this alliance, whatever it is not going to look good when it does nothing for Gaza, it does nothing for the West Bank, it does nothing for Lebanon, it does nothing for Syria. But let's say they collaborate against Yemen. People will say, well, Yemen was the country that supported Gaza, that the United States went to war against because it blocked the Red Sea to the Israeli regime over Gaza. So these countries, Turkey, which does trades, transports oil to Netanyahu's regime, and the others, they will be seen as fighting against the supporters of the Palestinian people. This is, the image is not, it will not be. I mean, you will see people online from these countries defending these policies, but these are basically elites that are close to the Saudis or close to the governments, and they will, of course, support this, and they will, attack Yemen, they'll attack Iran. But people who are looking at the reality on the ground about who's defending Palestine, it's the axis of resistance, no one else. They see through that. So it's going to be very difficult for the Americans in the months ahead because of all those indicators that you alluded to. It's going to be difficult for U.S. proxies to pursue the same policies, especially since that American power that they relied on is melting away, and the public, which is not necessarily has not been satisfied with many things over the past few years. They will be raising more questions, and they'll probably become more feared by these governments. The governments will become more fearful of these of an angry population that wants to see the genocide in Gaza come to an end. And meanwhile, the Iranians are simply reiterating their position on Gaza. The Iranian chair for the Supreme National Security Council, in his statement yesterday, was very explicit about, and something which I've said repeatedly, but that Palestine has to be a part of the MOU. It must be a part of the MOU. It is a part of the MOU for Iran, not just Gaza, but also the West Bank, because Iran didn't name Gaza; it said Palestine. So none of this bodes well for the United States or its allies. And then getting to your question on Iran and Oman, the negotiations between Iran and Oman, from my understanding, are almost complete. And probably one can say they've been completed. But I think since the issue of the Strait of Hormuz is linked to the broader issue of the MOU, then that is why the Iranians are holding back. Now, the Iranians never believed that the United States had any intention of implementing the MOU. Iran is not naive. But there are a number of reasons why Iran went for the MOU in the first place. One was that the Iranians wants to export oil. Iran was under siege, so it accumulated a lot of oil in tankers, tens of millions of barrels. As soon as the MOU was signed, Iran exported that oil to the Asian markets to strengthen its position for the months ahead. But also, Iran wanted its allies and friends across the world to know that Iran is seeking an agreement. It's not as if Iran wants forever war. Unlike the United States, Iran wants to bring it to an end. And so this is a message to its friends, both regional friends and global friends, that there is an end in sight if the Americans have the will to move in that direction. And the Iranians, knowing that the United States would undermine the deal, they had prepared themselves. And we saw that in the war that resumed after the United States violated the deal and set up that corridor in the Strait of Hormuz against Article 5. When the United States resumed the war, Iran performed even better than the 40-day war. And we saw that the Iranian missiles and drones were hitting very hard. And then we saw Yemen enter the war as well because of the stupidity of the Saudis by attacking Sana'a International Airport. So it made things much worse for the United States. So now the Iranians, they're holding this back. They're holding this agreement where there will be fees, by the way, contrary to what Vance, the U.S. Vice President Vance claimed. There will be fees. But Iran is withholding this until the issue of the MOU is resolved, because Iran is saying that the United States has to go back to the MOU and it has to fulfill it in the way which we interpret it. And thus the Iranians were more explicit in the statement yesterday. So the deal is ready for signing, from my understanding. There's no disagreement or anything like that that's holding it back. But the Iranians are waiting to see which direction the United States is going to go. Is it going to resume fighting? Because that's not an impossibility, Glenn. You and I both know that Trump is under enormous pressure from the Israeli regime, the Zionist lobby, his own ego, the Israeli firsters in the United States. he's under pressure to continue the war. This is the sort of narrative that we continue to see on Fox News, for example. And we know that's where he gets his intelligence briefings, by watching Fox News. So it's not impossible. No one should count this out. The Iranians are preparing for war, and the region is, Iran's allies are preparing for war. In Iraq, they're preparing. In Yemen, they're preparing. But that's one scenario. The other scenario is for the Americans to decide, well, we have to end this. The situation with Japan is getting dangerous. The shortage of oil is intensifying at a very rapid pace, more rapid than before, because of the Red Sea, and because Iran is not allowing the Emirates to export either. So the pressure is on, and but at the end of the day, the decision is made in the White House, which direction which direction we move in.
Well, it is quite significant, though. As you say, if the Oman-Iran deal is close to signing, this will more or less find a solution to the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm assuming that Oman is in close coordination with the US and others, trying to also accommodate their interests. So it would it can be interpreted as a wider agreement which solves this issue. But as you said, it's not the only problem. It's not as if the war comes to an end with the signing, because with the MOU, the United States has other obligations, as you said, they haven't fulfilled. That is, ending the blockade. I guess this could be done without too many problems. Ending the fighting in Lebanon, more problematic, I guess. The reparations, I don't see that happening either. But maybe in the way the language is framed, it can take on some formats I'm not sure if there's a compromise in terms of how this is made over time, or
there are ways to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, these countries in the Persian Gulf region, they have lots of money in U.S. markets and in the West, and they were with the United States in this war. But the MOU was devised in a way in which this, for example, the money that would come into Iran would effectively be a violation of U.S. Law, or at least a violation of presidential decrees or decisions made by the U.S. government with regards to investment in Iran. So, what and of course, I'm not familiar with the details, but what the models that the Iranians have been devising are models that are doable, but also they break the sanctions regime as well. So it doesn't have to come from the United States. Of course, there are things that the United States will have to do. There are many things that the United States will have to do. And first and foremost, for the Iranians, is handing over Lebanese territory back to the people of Lebanon, forcing the Israeli regime to back off in Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, these are key demands by Iran. This is not going to be over until there is peace in West Asia. And of course, Iran's assets that were stolen have to be returned, and the other issues which were discussed. But there are models in which these things can be carried out without, it's the United States sending money like from bank accounts in Washington to bank accounts in Tehran. There are other ways of doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking in the US, though, even if they do recognize all the paths to a potential victory has been exhausted, that they have to put an end to this thing. Domestic politics, though, it is an issue. I mean, Trump has spent like more than a decade now, saying how weak Obama was for unfreezing some Iranian assets. Also, the JCPOA was such a horrible deal. So the fact that he will have to now release Iranian funds and accept that deal, which at best wouldn't be any different than the JCPOA, it's going to be a very hard sell in Washington.
Of course, it's not clear if we will ever get there, but Iran is not going to compromise. So, the decision is theirs. It can be resolved within weeks. It can be resolved within months, but it can remain unresolved. But the Iranian position today, I think, is very different from what it was before, and it would be a further loss to the United States. So it's not as if the Iranians are expecting Trump to capitulate tomorrow and to carry out its obligations within the framework of the MOU based on the Iranian interpretation. But it does show the Iranian determination to make sure that the United States is defeated and that its allies in the region, in Gaza and Palestine, the people of Palestine, the West Bank, and elsewhere, that they feel the benefits of this U.S.-Israeli defeat. Because at the end of the day, the defeat of the United States, the regime, is a defeat for the Israeli regime. And the battle over the Strait of Hormuz was more important than any other battle that took place in West Asia during this period. It is, some would say, would ask me, why didn't Iran strike the Israeli regime during these 13 days? Well, the Iranians were focused on winning the Strait of Hormuz, and a defeat for the United States is a defeat for the Israeli regime. Of course, during this period, Iran was destroying all those radar and defense installations that were built in the Persian Gulf and in Saudi Arabia and Jordan and in northern Iraq to protect the Israeli regime. They destroyed that so that if there's war, the Iranians can use their drones, especially more easily, and their missiles. And also the Iranians want the crisis, the internal crisis in Israel that we're seeing. If the Israelis attack, Iran will hit back hard to hurt Netanyahu if Netanyahu starts a war. But right now, before the elections, the Iranians want to see what happens in Palestine. Not that Netanyahu's opponents are any less genocidal, but this deep divide in Palestine is a good thing for the region. But ultimately, the battle for the Strait of Hormuz was the decisive battle. That was what basically changed the direction of the region and changed the future of the world. And and what Yemen did was it strengthened what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. It made the Strait of Hormuz even more important because if Yemen had carried out these operations under normal circumstances, it would have bothered the Saudis. It would have caused them significant damage, but not. It wouldn't have critically punished the Saudis or the Americans or the West. But now, when you look at what's happening in the Bab al-Mandab Strait, alongside what's happened in the Strait of Hormuz, it becomes all the more effective. So no one in Iran is naive about the days and weeks and months ahead, but they're sending a very strong message to Washington that we won this war, and don't be under any illusion that you are going to be able to chip away at Iran's gains and the axis of resistance, the gains of the axis of resistance, chip them away at the negotiating table or undermine them by, cheating them in implementing an MOU or the MOU.
I think this is another problem for Trump, though, because he's been selling victories, or essentially the indicator of victory as being, look how many people we killed, or how much military or civil infrastructure we're able to destroy. But these are not indicators of victory, as you said. This is a very complex conflict, and there are definitely better indicators of success here than killing opponents.
And probably the worst is not just the fact that the United States is continuing to support a genocide, but the fact that the United States is constantly threatening the Iranians with a Holocaust. I mean, not only has the United States failed militarily, but the United States and the West has been exposed. I mean, Western elites have been exposed morally. And that's why people are turning in the West, people are turning against and especially the United States, against the political establishment. And we're seeing that play itself out in the civil war on the right, and the civil war on, Democratic Party. I don't know if you can call it the left, but in any case, that civil war is because of not just economic issues, but it's because of the moral bankruptcy of Western political elites, and people across the world see it. And of course, also the myth of U.S. power is broken. People see that every day the United States is saying that we destroyed this, we destroyed that, but every day the Iranians are firing missiles. So obviously, they're not destroying all those things that they claim to have destroyed. And it seems that I mean, even if the United States did not have the shortages that we're hearing about today, it would still lose, because during the 40-day war or 39 days of war, there was no talk of those shortages. I mean, those shortages existed, and the Iranians were depleting U.S. capabilities even beforehand. True Promise 1, we recall when Iran sent those missiles and drones, they spent huge quantities of, and then True Promise 2. All of these contributed to, and the war last year, all of these contributed to what we're seeing today. But even if those shortages didn't exist, or when they did not, the shortages weren't showing themselves on the battlefield during the 39, 40 days of war, even then they failed. They lost the war. They were using those missiles back then like there's no tomorrow. And ultimately, Trump, who demanded unconditional surrender, he was forced to accept the Iranian 10-point peace plan for the war to end after 39, 40 days. So the American myth, the myth of American power has collapsed. And of course, the myth of U.S. The U.S. economy being the powerhouse of the world, that has failed too. And what's going on in Japan is just one indicator.
No, it's it's a big mess, and of course, the one thing Trump could do to sell this as a victory is, of course, if he could get a nuclear deal, another JCPOA, but because then he can claim, well, we prevented Iran from getting nuclear weapons, so he can sell the story that we inflicted so much pain on them that they had to sign this deal, and now they won't get nuclear weapons. But even on this issue, though, because from what I understand, the Iranians don't want the US to cherry pick what they want out of an MOU, so the nuclear deal has to come at the end, which means that first the Americans will have to deal with the issues of ending sanctions, unfreezing Iranian assets, paying reparations, ending the blockade and the war on Lebanon. So it's
And Gaza
and Gaza. So we're not close to end of the war just yet, I guess. And of course, the Saudi deal, the Trump might be making now, the nuclear deal. I guess that could also throw another wrench into the system. It's hard to imagine this not impacting Iran's position on a nuclear deal. If there's one set of rules for the Saudis and one for the Iranians, and as the White House explains, well, that's because the Saudis are an ally, and this is now apparently how the international system should work. So,
but even there, Trump humiliated Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, not only did he a while back say he can kiss him in his backside, but then after all the negotiations and the deal was agreed upon, then Trump comes out and says, but first they have to accept Israel. I mean, the humiliation that the humiliation rituals are just extraordinary. The thing, the way in which the United States treats its friends and supposed friends, its proxies, it's unbelievable. And this contributes to their weakness. So Saudi Arabia, which has to, in order to get a nuclear, I mean, Iran offer, some people say, is Iran afraid of Saudi Arabia having a nuclear program? Iran offered Saudi Arabia the technology for nuclear enrichment. It's been offering it people can check online. Iran has been saying this for many, many years, that if they want the technology, we'll give it to them. But the Saudis refrain from doing so. They refrain from getting it from China or from Russia. They just simply sit there and wait to see if the Americans will give it to them. And when the Americans finally agree to give it to them with many restrictions, then they say, but you have to first bend the knee to Netanyahu. And then This does not strengthen the foundations of the ruling family.
Well, as a European, I'm all too familiar with how the US humiliates its satellite states. So, anyways, thank you again.
Cool figure. Follow me.